My name is Ava Turner, 43 years old, born and raised in Portland, now living in Seattle for the last 17 years. I work as a marketing director at a tech firm, demanding enough to keep my mind active, flexible enough to carve out a life beyond spreadsheets and campaign models. I've always considered myself a woman who grew into her confidence late. I bloomed after 30, learned my worth after 35, and thought I'd mastered emotional maturity by 40. My husband, Mark Turner, 45, has the calm, measured personality of a man who thrives in predictability. He teaches finance at a local college, the kind of job that lets him hide behind syllabi and structured semesters. For years, I admired his steadiness, his quiet humor, his reliability. I thought it balanced me, my ambition, my planning, my need to keep moving forward. My closest friend, well, the woman I used to call a friend, is Emily Rhodes, 42. We met in our late 20s, sharing tiny apartments, cheap takeout dinners, and venting about terrible boyfriends. She's the type who makes rooms warmer by entering them, always the one laughing loudest, always draped in something soft, floral, and disarmingly pretty. She used to be the person I trusted with the fragile pieces of my life. These three people defined my inner circle for over a decade. And this keynote is the story of how the first crack appeared, the night everything in my life began to tilt, quietly, devastatingly, and irreversibly. There's a moment every woman remembers, an ordinary pause, a breath no different from the thousands before it, when she realizes her life is about to split cleanly into two halves. For me, that moment arrived long before I heard the words that would break my marriage. It was earlier that day, sitting at my vanity, smoothing a faint line between my brows and noticing something different in my reflection. Not age, not fatigue, something quieter, a kind of stillness. I had been feeling it for months, though I never said it out loud, a strange, subtle distance growing between me and the life I'd built. It wasn't unhappiness. I wouldn't have dared use a word with that much weight. It was more like a light fog, the kind that softens everything until you can't see edges clearly. I should have listened to that instinct. I should have questioned it. But I was 43, successful, married, surrounded by long friendships. Who was I to imagine disaster? The day of Emily's birthday party, I woke up early before Mark, which wasn't unusual. He always slept deeply, like someone with nothing troubling his mind. Sometimes I envied him for that. I made coffee, answered emails, brushed the dog, and scrolled through outfit options for the evening. It was a rooftop gathering at a downtown apartment building that overlooked the water, the kind of place that could make anyone feel momentarily wealthy. Mark came downstairs around 9, scratching the back of his neck the way he did when he was groggy or distracted. "You're up early," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. His lips were cool. He smelled faintly of the fabric softener Emily always used, lavender and sandalwood. I didn't register that detail then. I filed it away without meaning to. "It's a busy week," I said, sipping coffee. I wanted to get ahead of things. He nodded, barely listening. He had started doing that more often, agreeing without hearing, smiling without wondering. Our marriage had slipped into a comfortable autopilot, and I had accepted it as normal. After 15 years together, routine felt like a sign of stability, not neglect. But looking back, I realized that morning held small warnings. A text message he shielded from view. A nervous energy he masked with a smile. A quick shower, unusually quick, like he was trying not to leave traces of something behind. I ignored all of it. That is the most painful truth to retell. I ignored everything. I spent the afternoon working on a presentation while Mark left for a faculty meeting. I didn't question it. Why would I? Trust, once settled into the bones, becomes a kind of blindness. I thought our marriage was solid because we didn't fight. Because we had systems and habits and inside jokes. Because I could predict his moods, finish his sentences, anticipate his choices. I mistook familiarity for closeness. Around 5, I finally dressed for the party, simple black dress, low heels, hair loose. At 43, I had made peace with the face I saw in the mirror. Not flawless, not untouched by time, but steady. A life lived, visible in soft edges rather than sharp lines. I even felt strangely optimistic about the evening. I liked parties, I liked celebrating people. I liked the illusion that we were all growing, evolving, aging gracefully together. Mark came home half an hour before we needed to leave. He looked polished, freshly shaved, wearing the blue shirt I bought him last Christmas. He smiled when he saw me, really smiled like he meant it. That smile is what still confuses me. How do people betray those they smile at? How do they hold love in one hand and lies in the other? "You look amazing," he said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. It was affectionate, warm, practiced. "Thanks," I said, kissing him lightly. "You clean up pretty well yourself." That exchange stayed lodged in my mind later, the softness of it, the normalcy. Sometimes betrayal isn't loud. Sometimes it lives quietly inside the most ordinary moments. We drove into the city with the windows cracked open. The Seattle evening air smelled like damp concrete and the beginnings of summer. People filled the sidewalks, streetlights blinked awake. It was a beautiful night, of course it was. Life is cruelly poetic like that. When we reached Emily's building, music floated from the rooftop, laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of joyful noise that makes you forget the world can be unkind. Emily greeted us at the elevator with her usual exuberance, hugging me tightly, squeezing Mark's arm a little too long. I didn't notice then, or maybe I did, but I categorized it as her personality. She had always been tactile. She hugged like she meant it, touched arms during conversations, leaned in close when she laughed. "Happy birthday," I said, handing her the small gift bag I'd prepared. She beamed. "Ava, you're an angel." But when she turned to Mark, something flickered in her expression, a softness, a familiarity, a shared something. It lasted half a second, but I felt it, like a thread pulled taut inside my chest. I shook it off. The first hour of the party went smoothly. I mingled, caught up with people I hadn't seen in months, sipped wine slowly. Mark drifted between groups, cracking jokes, pretending he didn't hate social gatherings. Emily floated around us all, glowing, soaking in attention like sunlight. But as the night deepened and people relaxed, I noticed something unsettling, small, disjointed pieces that didn't yet fit together. I noticed how Mark and Emily avoided standing too close, almost like distance required more effort than closeness. I noticed how they never made eye contact during conversations, as if looking directly at each other would reveal something neither of them wanted to risk. I noticed a woman from Emily's office glance between the two of them and immediately changed the topic. These were tiny things, invisible to most, but long friendships teach you a language people don't intentionally speak. I could feel an inconsistency in the air, like a room painted in colors that didn't match. Still, I didn't imagine an affair. I couldn't have. That kind of betrayal felt too big, too cinematic, too far from the quiet life Mark and I lived. It wasn't until I stepped away to use the restroom that I caught the first real clue. I was walking down the hallway inside the apartment when I saw them reflected in a floor-length mirror, Mark and Emily standing near the refreshments table, backs turned, talking closely. Too closely. His hand brushed her arm as he leaned in. She didn't flinch. She didn't move away. That one touch, absent-minded, familiar, is what shook me. Not because it was overtly romantic, but because it wasn't awkward. No hesitation, no surprise, touch born of habit, not impulse. I kept walking, pretending I hadn't seen anything, pretending I wasn't suddenly aware of my heartbeat in my throat. On my way back, I slowed near the hallway corner, hearing Emily's laugh, soft, not her usual loud, dramatic laugh, the private one she used during late-night confessions over wine. A laugh I used to think belonged to our friendship. Hearing it directed at Mark struck me with a quiet, icy dread. I didn't confront them, not yet. I rejoined the party with a calm I didn't feel, perhaps instinctively knowing that the truth would reveal itself without my forcing it. And it did. Half an hour later, I overheard two of Emily's acquaintances near the railing, whispering in the careless way people do after a few drinks. "I still can't believe they've kept it going this long," one said. "5 years," the other replied. "That's practically a second marriage." I should have walked away. I should have respected their privacy, even if their words weren't meant for me. But something in my chest tightened, anchored me to the spot. "Do you think Ava knows?" I doubt it. She seems so trusting. Trusting. The word hit me like a physical blow. My first instinct was denial. Surely they were talking about someone else. Surely this wasn't about me, my husband, my friend, my life. But then one of them said Emily's name. That was the moment, the precise second my world split into before and after. I didn't gasp, I didn't cry, I didn't collapse. Something colder happened instead. I went utterly, painfully still. My mind stopped rushing long enough to gather meaning, connect dots, assemble the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. 5 years, half a decade, a double life unfolding beneath the very foundation of my marriage and my closest friendship. I didn't confront the women. I did confront Mark. I didn't confront Emily. Instead, I walked to the edge of the rooftop and stared out at the water, letting the breeze cool the heat beneath my skin. I felt a strange mixture of nausea, heartbreak, and clarity. Not rage. Rage requires immediacy, and my emotions were too stunned to ignite. I stood there for several minutes, holding onto the railing, letting my breathing even out. People moved and laughed behind me, oblivious to the unraveling happening at the party's edge. When Mark approached a minute later, asking if I was okay, I looked at him with a steady expression I didn't know I was capable of. "I'm fine," I said, and I was, in a terrifying, unfamiliar way. A new version of me was forming in the space where my trust had been. A woman who understood she had been living beside a lie. A woman who knew something had shifted irrevocably. A woman who would not react impulsively, but strategically. I didn't know then how far that transformation would go. I didn't yet see the plan forming or the strength I would discover. I only knew one thing with absolute clarity as I stood on that rooftop, watching the city lights shimmer across the water. The life I had before this moment was gone, and whoever I would become next, she would not be a woman to underestimate. People assume betrayal explodes loudly, that it arrives with shouting, broken dishes, slammed doors, or dramatic ultimatums. But for me, the truth didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like a shift in temperature, a sudden coldness inside my chest that told me I wasn't the same woman who walked into that rooftop party. The moment I understood the affair had lasted 5 years, something inside me broke with a soft, almost imperceptible snap. It wasn't hysterical heartbreak or blinding rage. It was quiet, controlled, sharp, and that kind of pain is the most dangerous kind because it gives you clarity. I remember every detail of that rooftop, but not because I wanted to hold on to the memory. It branded itself into me. The sound of glasses clinking, the low hum of conversations, the golden summer lights strung above us, the breeze brushing my shoulders, carrying the faint scent of the bay. Everything was too clear, too in focus, like my senses suddenly expanded to take in every angle of the lie surrounding me. Mark was talking to someone, a coworker of Emily's, I think, when I walked back toward him. His face lit up when he saw me. That smile had always made me feel chosen, loved, safe. Now it felt like a warning label on a poison bottle. "Hey, you disappeared," he said, placing a hand at the small of my back. His touch felt different now, not comforting, foreign. Like the touch of a man I didn't know. "I needed some air," I said, keeping my voice calm, too calm. He nodded, oblivious to the shift inside me, or maybe he sensed something but assumed it was unrelated to him. He'd grown comfortable in his secrets. Comfort makes people careless. Emily drifted toward us, laughing with a group of friends. When her eyes met mine, she beamed like nothing was wrong, like the person looking back at her wasn't the woman she'd betrayed for half a decade. "Come on," she said, grabbing my arm lightly. "We're cutting the cake." Her fingers were warm, familiar. The same fingers that had hugged me through bad breakups, helped me move apartments, painted my nails before dates. Fingers that had probably touched my husband in ways I couldn't bear to imagine. I pulled my arm free discreetly. She didn't notice, or maybe she pretended not to. The cake cutting moment was loud, bright, full of cheers and off-key singing. Everyone crowded around. I stood a step back, watching Mark and Emily stand too close. Not physically touching, but aligned in a way I now recognized, shoulders angled toward each other, laughter synchronized, an invisible thread pulling them into the same emotional space. It enraged me in a way I couldn't yet express. What unsettled me most was the realization that everyone else probably knew, maybe not details, but enough. The way some guests looked between the three of us made it clear. My life had been a quiet spectacle for people who weren't brave enough to tell me the truth. Humiliation burned beneath my skin. When the candles were blown out and slices of cake passed around, I excused myself again and slipped into the building's stairwell. The door shut behind me with a metallic thud, and suddenly the silence felt suffocating. I leaned against the cold wall, breathing slowly, methodically, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. My thoughts moved rapidly, almost mechanically. 5 years. Where was I 5 years ago, working late nights, trusting Mark to pick up the slack, planning vacations, laughing with Emily, sharing secrets with her, telling her about my doubts, my insecurities, my fears. She had listened, she had nodded, she had hugged me. And all along, she knew she was the reason I felt something slipping in my marriage. The betrayal layered itself deeper the more I considered it. It wasn't just adultery, it was emotional theft, a 5 year performance, a double life staged in front of me. I didn't cry. My tears seemed stuck somewhere in a part of me I couldn't access yet. Instead, I felt something new rising in my chest, slow, steady, and powerful. Resolve, not revenge, not yet. Resolve. A decision forming quietly, like ice freezing water into something sharper. My mind began piecing together memories, moments I had dismissed over the years. The late-night texts Mark said were from a student, the way Emily defended him whenever I complained about his distance, the subtle tension between them whenever we all traveled together, the time I found a scarf in Mark's car and he claimed it belonged to a coworker and Emily had supported the lie without blinking. Every detail aligned now with frightening clarity. I pressed my palms against my temples, grounding myself. I didn't want to confront them, not tonight, not with an audience, not when my emotions were too raw to control with precision. I needed to think, I needed to plan, I needed to understand what I wanted from the ashes of this moment. The stairwell door opened suddenly, making me jolt. It was Emily, of course it was. "Ava, are you okay?" she asked, stepping toward me with concern on her face. Real concern or expertly performed concern? I couldn't tell anymore. "Yes," I said. "You sure?" "Look pale." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you ever need a break from everything, you know you can talk to me, always." The audacity, hearing her say that after discovering the truth felt like being stabbed gently, poetically. I studied her face closely for the first time that night, the faint shimmer of highlighter on her cheekbones, the soft blue dress she'd chosen, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd had since our 20s. Everything about her looked the same, yet I saw her differently now. Not as the friend who stood by me through every major milestone, but as the woman who had stood behind my back with my husband. Something in me hardened then, a quiet click of transformation. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady. "You're a good friend." The lie tasted bitter, but it served a purpose. Her eyes softened. Always, always, the word echoed with painful irony. I walked back to the party with her, but I wasn't the same woman who had stepped into that stairwell. A new version of me was forming, one forged from clarity, betrayal, and control. The rest of the night passed in a haze of forced conversations, fake smiles, and observations. I watched Mark closely, every gesture, every micro expression, every slip in his facade. He looked relaxed, too relaxed, a man confident that his secret world was safely protected. But he felt something different on our drive home. I could see it in the way he kept glancing at me, sensing a shift he couldn't name. "You're quiet," he said finally, turning down the radio. "I'm thinking," I replied calmly. "About what?" I looked out the window at the passing lights. "Just life." He nodded slowly, confused but unwilling to push. Mark had always preferred peace, even artificial peace, to digging into difficult truths. When we reached the house, he kissed my forehead before heading upstairs. I watched him climb the steps, realizing how strange it felt to see him moving through our home, not as my partner, but as a man who had fooled me for years. I didn't follow him to bed. Instead, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the framed photos on the wall, vacations, anniversaries, Christmas gatherings, moments frozen in ignorance. I studied them like artifacts of a life that wasn't entirely real. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But beneath the heartbreak, something steadier pulsed. I am not weak. I am not fragile. I am not going to break because two people underestimated me. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning of a very different chapter. I looked around the dark room, our furniture, our memories, our shared space, and understood the truth. Mark and Emily thought they knew me. They thought I'd never see the truth. They thought I'd crumble if I ever found out. But they had both forgotten something important. I have rebuilt myself before. I know how to rise quietly, strategically, and without warning. And that night, the night my marriage and friendship ended, was the night I began rising again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with precision. Because sometimes the most powerful transformation isn't the one people can see coming. It's the one that happens silently, beneath the surface, preparing to emerge when no one expects it. I went upstairs hours later, finding Mark asleep, breathing easily, unaware of the storm gathering beside him. I climbed into bed without waking him, not because I forgave him, not because I didn't care, but because I needed time, time to think, time to plan, time to step fully into the new version of myself. The woman who would not rush, the woman who would not confront without strategy, the woman who would turn betrayal into control. As I closed my eyes that night, I knew one thing: he had rewritten the rules of our life. Now it was my turn to write the next chapter. Morning arrived too soon. I barely slept, my mind a constant loop of details, fragments, memories rearranging themselves into a pattern I had never noticed before. But when I finally opened my eyes, I didn't feel exhausted. I felt alert, steady. Almost unnervingly calm, the kind of calm that comes after surviving a storm you didn't realize you were already in. Mark was already awake, getting dressed for work. His back was turned to me, and for the first time in our marriage, I allowed myself to look at him not as my husband, but as a stranger occupying familiar space. He buttoned his shirt with absent-minded ease, humming under his breath, content oblivious. That small display of ordinary happiness irritated me more than anything else. 5 years of betrayal, and he still had the luxury of peace. I sat up slowly. "You're leaving early." He turned, surprised. "Faculty breakfast. I told you last week." No, he hadn't. He only believed he had because he had become used to lying so effortlessly that the lines between truth and fiction blurred for him long ago. I nodded. "Right, I forgot." He smiled in that soft, affectionate way that made my stomach twist. "You okay? You seemed off last night." "Just tired," I replied. He walked over, kissed my forehead, and left the room. It took everything in me not to recoil, not because the kiss felt wrong, but because it felt too normal, too familiar, a gesture practiced over years, a gesture he had probably gifted to her too. When I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I exhaled slowly, an exhale that felt like releasing years of denial. I wrapped myself in a robe and walked downstairs. The house was still, but not peaceful. It felt like a crime scene. Every object suddenly held a question, every memory carried a new shadow. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the spot where Mark usually placed his phone while making coffee. His phone, the thought slid into my mind quietly. If he had been hiding an affair for 5 years, his phone was the key. But he had taken it with him, of course he had. He was careful. Still, the urge to investigate had already cracked open something inside me. 5 years of stolen moments. 5 years of secrets hidden in small ways I had never noticed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized if their affair had lasted that long, they had left breadcrumbs. I just needed to learn how to see them. I spent the next hour walking through rooms as if they belonged to someone else, opening drawers, checking closet shelves, not frantically, methodically. I wasn't looking for something specific. I was observing, studying, letting my instincts guide me. On the top shelf of Mark's home office closet, tucked inside a shoebox filled with old warranty booklets, I found the first breadcrumb, a hotel receipt from 3 years ago, a Thursday evening, a date when Mark had told me he was attending a faculty dinner. The receipt wasn't damning by itself. It was from a mid-range hotel bar, 2 drinks listed, nothing more. But I recognized the handwriting of the signature at the bottom. Mark's. And the timestamp lined up perfectly with a night Emily had canceled our dinner plans unexpectedly. My hands didn't shake, my breathing didn't quicken, I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt too much to feel anything clearly, a numbness that protected me from crumbling. I placed the receipt on Mark's desk and kept going. In the garage, hidden behind old Christmas boxes, I found a second breadcrumb, an unfamiliar scarf. Soft fabric, pale pink, delicate lace along the edges. I had seen Emily wear something similar once. I remembered complimenting her, and she said it was a birthday gift from a friend. I ran my fingers over the fabric. It smelled faintly of an old perfume, sweet, floral, familiar. My chest tightened. I placed the scarf with the hotel receipt and continued my search. By afternoon, I had collected the following: 3 unexplained restaurant charges, a second hotel receipt dated 2 years ago, a handwritten note that simply said, "I missed last night already," a pair of earrings I had never seen before, definitely not mine, none of it was explicit. No photos, no texts, no confessions, but it didn't need to be explicit. The truth was already undeniable. Each object layered itself over the last, creating a timeline I couldn't ignore. Tiny fractures joining into a full break. Some people crumble when faced with evidence. Some scream or drown in grief or break down in a way that forces them to beg for answers. I didn't crumble, I didn't scream, I didn't break, I organized. I placed every piece of evidence neatly on Mark's office desk, not to confront him, not yet, but to see it laid out clearly, like a map of the double life he had lived, right under my nose. As I looked at the objects, a strange transformation settled over me, a quiet shift like stepping from soft earth onto stone. I realized something important. I wasn't devastated anymore. I was insulted by the sloppiness of their hiding, insulted by their confidence that I was too trusting to notice, insulted by the idea that I had been the only honest one in a world built out of lies. And under that insult, something stronger began to form: control. Not revenge, control. Revenge is fueled by emotion. Control is fueled by clarity. I wasn't interested in screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. I wanted understanding. I wanted strategy. I wanted to reclaim the narrative of my own life without letting them see me break. If Mark and Emily had been careful for 5 years, I needed to be even more careful now. I spent the rest of the day planning internally, thinking through next steps like a strategist preparing a complex campaign. What assets were in my name, which accounts were joint, what conversations had legal weight, what consequences would hurt them most without making me lose myself. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about ego, it was about balance. If they had taken something from me, I would take something back, but in a way that left no stain on my integrity. By evening, my strategy was beginning to take shape, not fully formed, but outlined enough that I felt a sense of direction. When Mark came home, once again humming softly as he unlocked the door, I was sitting on the couch reading, a picture of calm. He kissed my cheek automatically. I didn't move. "How was your day?" he asked. "Productive," I said. "Yours?" "Long," he replied, loosening his tie. "I'm exhausted." I watched him walk to his office. I waited. 10 seconds later, I heard him stop abruptly, then silence, a long silence. He had found the items spread neatly on his desk. I didn't move, I didn't call out, I didn't go to him. I wanted him to absorb it, every piece, every implication, every unspoken question. He walked back slowly, pale and stiff, stopping in the doorway of the living room. "Ava," he whispered, voice cracking slightly. What is all that?" I looked up at him calmly. "Evidence." His mouth opened, closed. He looked terrified. "Good. Where did you get?" "I didn't have to look hard," I said softly. He swallowed, chest rising and falling too quickly. "Ava, please let me explain." "No," I said, "not yet." That froze him. Mark was used to my empathy, my patience, my inclination toward conversation. This version of me, cold, composed, unreadable, was foreign to him, and I wanted him to feel that unfamiliarity. I wanted him to feel the distance I had been forced into. "I'm not ready to talk," I said, standing up. "You've had 5 years to decide what story you were going to tell. I've only had one day." He stepped toward me. "Ava, please, can we?" I raised a hand, not dramatically, just firmly enough to stop him. "No," I repeated. "I'll speak when I'm ready, not a moment before." His eyes were wet now. He looked like a man realizing the ground beneath him had shifted too suddenly to regain balance. I walked past him, slow and controlled, and headed upstairs. In that moment, I understood the power of silence, of restraint, of refusing to give someone the privilege of emotional access. Mark had spent 5 years giving another woman pieces of himself that he should have given to me. Now he would learn what losing access to me truly felt like. When I closed the bedroom door behind me, I felt a sensation I hadn't felt in days, maybe even years: strength. Not the loud, fiery strength people expect, but the quiet, controlled strength of a woman reclaiming herself piece by piece. This wasn't survival. This was preparation. Preparation for a truth he wasn't ready to face and a future I was no longer afraid of shaping on my own terms. And as I lay in bed, listening to the faint sounds of Mark pacing downstairs, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next chapter wouldn't be about what they had done to me. It would be about what I chose to do with the truth. The day after Mark found the evidence on his desk, a strange stillness settled over the house. Not silence. Silence is passive, empty. This was different. This was the quiet that comes when two people realize the truth has finally stepped into the room and is refusing to leave. I woke before him again. Not intentionally, my mind simply refused to rest. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, aware of a new energy inside me. Not fear. Not grief, a controlled readiness like the steady inhale before a diver breaks the surface. When Mark stirred beside me, I felt him carefully shift his weight as if afraid of waking a fragile thing. He wasn't used to being cautious around me. That alone spoke volumes. Morning, he whispered. I didn't answer. I got up, walked to the bathroom, and shut the door, not slamming it, not theatrically, just shutting it with the finality of someone who didn't owe him softness anymore. My morning routine felt different now. My reflection looked different too, not colder, not harsher, but sharper. I had edges again, I had presence, I had purpose. Downstairs, Mark sat at the dining table, hands clasped together. He looked like a man waiting for a verdict. Ava, please, we need to talk. We will, I said, pouring myself coffee, but not the way you're expecting. He looked confused, terrified, good. I wanted him uncomfortable, but not because I was angry, because he needed to understand the ground he once stood on was gone. I didn't mean for he began. You had 5 years, I said calmly. You meant for everything. He shut his mouth quickly, swallowing the rest of whatever excuse he had prepared. I didn't want excuses. I wanted honesty, but not for emotional closure, for information. Information is power when you use it correctly. I took my coffee to the living room and sat on the couch. Sit. He sat across from me like a student facing a professor he feared disappointing. I looked him directly in the eyes for the first time since discovering the truth. Start from the beginning, I said. Plain facts, no emotional storylines, no self-pity, just the timeline. He nodded shakily. Okay, he began talking, and for the first time in our marriage, he didn't decorate his words. He told me it started during a time when I was working 60-hour weeks on a major project. He said they got close, a phrase that made my jaw tighten but didn't break my composure. He said it wasn't planned, wasn't intentional. I stopped him. Affairs don't accidentally last 5 years. He lowered his eyes. You're right. He told me the days, the patterns, the frequency, the moments it happened under excuses so ordinary I wanted to laugh at the simplicity of it all. Explained how they kept it hidden, how routine became camouflage. He detailed the gradual increase in emotional involvement, how it stopped feeling like a fling and started feeling like something else. That phrasing bothered me, but I didn't react. I needed clarity, not emotion. And did you love her? I asked. He froze. My voice stayed even. The truth is no longer something you can protect me from. Say it. He inhaled deeply, and for a moment I saw the guilt wash over him in real time. Yes, he said quietly. I did, not I do. I did, past tense, a tiny difference, but I registered it. I didn't flinch. And her? Yes, she said she did. My heartbeat stayed steady. My breathing remained controlled. I had already prepared myself for this answer. Pain doesn't destroy you when you expect it. And why did it end? I asked. It didn't, he whispered. Not completely. We tried to stop, but we kept slipping. Slipping, an interesting word. As if betrayal was a puddle he accidentally stepped into rather than a path he walked willingly. He continued talking, explaining the patterns, the meetings, the reasons. I listened to every detail, not to torture myself, but to understand the full shape of the betrayal. I needed the complete map before I decided what to do with it. When he finished, the room felt heavier, as if the truth had settled into the furniture. I stood. Thank you for the honesty. I wanted facts, not remorse. He blinked, confused. You don't want an apology. You had 5 years to not need one, I said. Now it's irrelevant. That line hit him harder than raising my voice ever could. I walked to the window, looking out at the street. Quiet, ordinary, unchanged, but nothing in my life felt ordinary anymore. Here's how this is going to happen, I said. I need time. My decisions will be based on reason, not emotion. I don't want reaction. I want consequence. He looked terrified again. Ava, please don't stop, I said firmly. This isn't a negotiation. He fell silent immediately. Good, he was finally learning the new rules. You will stay in the guest room for now, I continued. You will not touch me. You will not try to hug me. You will not follow me around the house. When I want to talk, I will talk. Until then, you give me space. Of course, he whispered. I turned back toward him. And you will not contact her. His expression shifted, fear mixed with something else. Panic. Are you still talking? I asked quietly. Tell me the truth. He hesitated. No, not since last night. I told her it was over. Because you were caught, I said. He didn't deny it. Good, I said. Keep it that way. He stared at me with an expression I didn't expect, a mix of guilt, desperation, and something closer to awe, as if he was only now realizing who I was capable of becoming. He whispered, "I don't want to lose you. You should have thought of that 5 years ago." I turned away, ending the conversation. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I simply felt aligned with myself again. The rest of the day, I functioned normally: emails, meetings, coffee, tasks, but inside, something was evolving with precision. I wasn't plotting petty revenge or emotional explosions. I wasn't imagining dramatic confrontations or shouting matches. My version of revenge wasn't destruction. It was reclamation, reclaiming time, reclaiming truth, reclaiming myself. By evening, Mark had moved into the guest room without argument. I appreciated the compliance. It meant he finally understood the seriousness of what was coming. I didn't speak to him again that night, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed the quiet to shape my next steps. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't the woman from the rooftop party. I wasn't the woman who cried into stairwell walls. I wasn't the woman searching drawers for clues. I was calm, focused, centered, and within that calm, I knew what the next phase would be: not forgiveness, not forgetting, not tolerance, control. The kind of control earned through clarity, truth, and deliberate action. The kind of control they never expected me to take back. This was no longer about what they had done. This was about what I would do. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but with intention, because my revenge would not be messy. It would not be loud, it would not be cruel, it would be unmistakable, and it would begin soon, very soon. The morning I decided to end the quiet phase of my plan, I woke before dawn, not from anxiety or fear. Those emotions had burned out of me days ago. What remained was something steadier, something that felt like standing at the edge of a long bridge, knowing exactly where it ends. When I walked downstairs, the house felt different. Not empty. Emptiness implies something missing. This house wasn't missing anything. It was shedding illusions, lies, the false comfort of a marriage that only existed in photographs and other people's memories. Mark was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, staring at the floor. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes flicked up when he heard me, and I watched the hope bloom in them for a moment before collapsing under the weight of reality. "Need to talk," I said. He straightened. "Ava, I've been waiting. I want to fix." "You're not fixing anything," I interrupted. "You're listening." He fell quiet immediately. Good. It was time he understood what real communication looked like. I sat at the table. He sat across from me, his hands tightly clasped as if he were holding on to the last piece of his life. For a moment I studied him, not with affection, not with nostalgia, with clarity. The man in front of me wasn't my partner. He wasn't my confidant. He was a chapter of my life that had already ended. The only thing left was writing the final paragraph. "I've made my decision," I said. His breath caught. "Okay, you and I are done." He closed his eyes, shoulders sagging as if the words physically struck him. When he opened them again, the fear in them was unmistakable. "Ava, please, this isn't up for debate," I said. "You ended this marriage a long time ago. I'm just acknowledging the truth you've been living with." He swallowed hard. "Can we try counseling? Anything? I'll do whatever." "No," the word came out calm, almost gentle. "I'm not salvaging something that was abandoned 5 years ago." He leaned forward. "I made a mistake." "Mistake is forgetting a birthday or missing a flight," I said. "You built an entire second relationship. That's not a mistake. That's a choice, repeated, protected, and hidden." He broke. I could see it in the way he pressed his palms over his eyes, the way his breath shook. I would have reached for him, not now. Compassion and forgiveness are gifts, not obligations. We're handling this rationally, I continued. We're adults, and we're going to move through this with structure, not chaos. He looked at me through red eyes. "What do you want me to do?" It was the first time he had ever asked me that, with humility instead of resistance. I recognized the irony. He had learned to listen only after the privilege of my loyalty was gone. "You're moving out," I said, "today." "Day?" His voice cracked. "Yes, you can take clothes, essentials, the things that are personally yours. The rest stays until we divide everything legally." He shook his head slowly, disbelief clouding his face. "Ava, this is my home too." "It was," I said, past tense. "You built memories somewhere else for 5 years. You made your emotional home with another woman. I refused to share space with someone who treated me like an option." He tried to argue, but I raised my hand. "No more explanations. More emotional bargaining. You made room for a double life, now you'll make room for its consequences." He leaned back, defeated. I continued, "I've already spoken to an attorney. The process is clean, straightforward. I'm not going to drag this out or humiliate you, but I'm also not protecting you. I'm protecting myself." He nodded stiffly, the reality settling into his bones. "And one more thing," I said. He looked up. "You will not contact her." He didn't answer. "Say it," I insisted. "I won't," he whispered. "Good, because if you do, I'll know." He didn't ask how, and I didn't explain. Some things don't need explanation, they only need boundaries. He stood as if his legs were barely supporting him. "Ava, I'm sorry. I believe you," I said, "but apologies don't rebuild trust. Integrity does, and that takes more than words." He left the kitchen, and I listened to him move through the house, opening drawers, closing closets, packing in silence, not rushing, not dragging his feet. Just moving like a man walking through the ruins of something he thought would stand forever. I didn't watch him. I didn't need to. My attachment had already dissolved. Not in anger. Anger burns too quickly. This was something quieter, something stronger, freedom. When I heard the front door open, I stood and walked to the entryway. Mark stood there with 2 suitcases, his shoulders slumped, his eyes raw. "I love you," he said weakly. I nodded once. "I loved who you were, not who you became." He flinched, not because the words were cruel, they were simply the truth. He stepped outside, and the moment the door closed behind him, an exhale left my body so deep it felt like I had been holding it for years. The house was finally mine again, not because he was gone, but because I was back. I walked through every room slowly, not with sadness, but with a strange sense of expansion. The walls felt different, brighter, taller. I wasn't mourning the loss of a marriage, I was recognizing the return of myself. And then came the final part of my plan, not revenge against him, not revenge against her. Revenge against the version of me that accepted crumbs out of loyalty. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to my attorney confirming the next steps. Efficient, direct, confident. I scheduled meetings, organized documents, prepared statements. My life wasn't falling apart, it was being reorganized. And then I did something simple, something symbolic. I took down the framed wedding photo from the hallway, not dramatically, not with bitterness. I just removed it, placed it in a box, and set the box by the door. It felt like clearing dust from a bookshelf. My revenge wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about refusing to shrink. It was about standing in the center of my life without apologizing for taking up space. As I stood there alone, steady, unbroken, I realized something. I hadn't lost anything. I had uncovered something, me, the woman who had been drowned out by compromise, the woman who had been polite about her own pain, the woman who had ignored the quiet warning signs inside herself. She was back, and she was stronger than the version of me that entered the rooftop party that night. The betrayal didn't define me. My response did. Revenge wasn't destroying him. Revenge was rebuilding me. With clarity, with intention, with truth. And as I stood in my living room, the morning sun warming the walls, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, unshakable. I had closed a chapter with finality. And now I was free to write the rest without permission.